When I look back at the last year, it still feels like my world was turned upside down overnight. My husband, Mark, was everything to me. We met in college, built a life together, raised our son Daniel, and shared dreams about growing old side by side. But life doesn't always honor the promises we make in our hearts. When Mark passed away unexpectedly from a sudden heart attack, it was as if the ground had been pulled from beneath me. At first, I was lost in grief. The mornings were the hardest. I would wake up, turn my head expecting to see him, only to be met by the cold emptiness of his side of the bed. I tried to stay strong for Daniel, who was only 16, but I quickly realized that while I was drowning in silence, my son was withdrawing into one of his own. Daniel was always an easygoing boy, full of energy, laughter, and constant chatter. But after Mark's passing, something shifted. He became quieter, retreating into his room for hours. He stopped playing basketball with his friends, stopped joking with me at the dinner table, and seemed to carry a shadow over his face. At first, I thought it was just his way of grieving. Everyone mourns differently, I told myself. But soon, his behavior began to worry me deeply. One evening, I was in the kitchen making tea when I noticed Daniel sitting at the dining table, staring blankly at a book he hadn't even opened. His shoulders were slumped, and he looked so fragile. I wanted to reach out, but it felt like there was an invisible wall between us. I whispered, "Are you okay, honey?" He nodded quickly, too quickly, and forced a smile. I knew that smile. It was the same fake one I had practiced for weeks, pretending I was fine when I wasn't. I tried giving him space, thinking maybe he needed time. But then, little things started to worry me. He would sneak outside late at night, standing in the backyard for hours, staring at the stars. Sometimes I caught him with tears in his eyes, quickly wiping them away before I could say anything. It wasn't just grief, it was as though he was hiding something deeper. The turning point came one rainy afternoon. I was cleaning out Mark's closet when I found his old leather jacket. Just holding it in my hands brought tears streaming down my face. As I pressed it against me, I heard the sound of footsteps behind me. Daniel stood there in the doorway, watching me with such an unreadable expression. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then, in a shaky voice, he asked, "Mom, do you ever feel like you can't breathe without him?" The words broke me. I dropped the jacket and hugged him tightly. That was the moment I realized my son wasn't just grieving silently, he was drowning in it. We sat together for hours that day, finally opening up about our pain. Daniel admitted he had been pretending to be strong for me, hiding his tears because he didn't want to make things harder for me. I admitted I had been doing the same for him. We both laughed a little through our tears, realizing how foolish it was, two people under the same roof, both hurting, yet both trying to protect each other by staying silent. From that day forward, things began to change. Slowly, step by step, we made an unspoken pact to heal together. We started with small things like sharing meals without rushing through them, telling stories about Mark, and even watching his favorite movies on Fridays. It wasn't easy, sometimes the memories hurt more than they healed. But with every shared tear and every shared laugh, the silence in the house began to lift. One weekend, Daniel brought out a dusty old photo album from the attic. We sat on the couch flipping through pictures, Mark teaching him how to ride a bike, family road trips, birthdays filled with laughter. For the first time in months, Daniel's smile reached his eyes again. "Dad would want us to remember the good stuff, wouldn't he?" he said softly. And I nodded, knowing he was right. A few weeks later, Daniel came to me with an idea. "Mom, can we plant something in the garden for Dad?" At first, I wasn't sure I could handle it. The thought of dedicating a space to Mark felt so final. But the next morning, we went to the nursery together and picked out bright flowers, ones Mark had always loved. As we dug into the soil side by side, Daniel's face looked lighter, freer, as though he was finally releasing some of the weight he had been carrying. Life didn't magically fix itself. Grief still lingered, and there were still nights when I cried quietly into my pillow. But something important had shifted. We were no longer walking through the pain alone. Daniel had started playing basketball again, his laughter echoing in the backyard. I found myself cooking real meals again, humming softly in the kitchen like I used to. Slowly, the house that had once felt empty began to feel like a home again. The final moment that sealed our healing journey came on a golden Sunday evening. We had just finished planting the last flowers in the garden. The sun dipped low, casting a warm glow over us. Daniel turned to me and said, "Mom, I think Dad would be proud of us." I pulled him into a hug, holding on to him tightly, knowing that even though Mark was gone, his love was still here, living in us, guiding us forward. As I stood there with my son, I realized that strange behavior I had noticed in him wasn't just sadness, it was his way of coping, of struggling, of finding a path back to life. Together, we had learned the hardest but most valuable lesson, that grief doesn't end, but love gives us the strength to keep moving. And for the first time since Mark passed, I felt something I thought I had lost forever: hope.